Just a
Okay.
minute.
Is this good?
That's good. Are we ready to go here?
All right, now that all your plates are full, and we'll start the program. This is Dr. Gary Hauck. Okay, and he's a doctor of humanities, but he's also an ordained minister, and he's a published author. I have his card here if anybody's interested in any of the titles of his books. They're available through Amazon. But we belong to the Tri-River Group, and every year they have a luncheon. And Gary was the main speaker at the luncheon, and several of us were there, and we enjoyed his talk, and we thought it would be perfect for us, and especially since we're finishing up the theme for the year of food. And so I will present, he's going to talk about food that he's sampled around the world.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me, and thank you, Mike. And what a well-oiled machine. They said 7 o'clock, the meeting would end. Bang, the clock even struck 7 at that moment. I'm so impressed. And technology works here. Isn't this awesome? So I thought it might not, so I was trying to go back in my mind and make sure I had all my dates and my things ready to go. My memory is not what it used to be, folks. I taught college 44 years, and I'll see students at the mall or Meyer, and they'll say hello, and I'll say hey, you know, and I'm trying to figure out who they are and where I had them. And 2 weeks ago, a nice young man came to me and he said, "Hello there." I said, "I'm sorry, you look so familiar. Do I know you?" And he said, "Yes, Dad." So it gets really bad after a while. The cemetery walk. Bethany, what was dead people, historical figures, you all acted out their life story after doing research. Okay, so that is so cool. I applaud you for that. And by the way, I applaud all of you who are volunteers in any shape or form. Thank you for doing what you do. I acted out Ole Amble, for whom Amble, Michigan is named. Did some research on him and acted out his story. And at a church, they said to me, "You ought to write the book." And so I said, okay. And so I did. So that's my most recent book. It's called They Call Me Reverend Amble. And so it's based upon this immigrant from Norway who came here in 1874, planted 7 churches, pastored all 7 for 53 years. An incredible story of a man who had a great sense of humor. He loved the Scandinavian pipe. He loved people. It's a delightful book. So if you want a chance I say delightful story. So if you want a chance to look at that, I'm happy. I have cards here as well after we're through here. So who does not like to eat? I mean, we have this in common, wonderful foods. How many were at the Tri-River meeting in August? Anybody else in here? Okay, so for you guys, you know this stuff. So we'll just enjoy it together again, if you don't mind. So a few things about my love for food. I am a lover both of history and of food. I have had a chance to be a part of the museum in Greenville for a number of years. And of course, this last year, our whole theme for our state was celebrating the foods that we love. Had a chance to visit a wide variety of museums throughout the state and learned quite a bit about that. The only time in my entire life I wore an apron was that day. So I do not cook, I just eat, and I love the foods that I eat. So about my background, I have been a part of the museum in Greenville for probably 6 or 7 years as a board member and also a docent. But my family is all about food. So here's my dad, a German-American pie baker by trade. So he baked pies for 44 years. I always had in the fridge, always had blueberry, apple, cherry, Montgomery, Boston cream, always. And so I grew up loving pies. My daughter, our oldest of 4, is a 44-year-old head chef right now in Holland, Michigan. And my wife is also a very good cook. So I've been surrounded by food all my life that I really enjoy. But my background, if this works, and see if it does. Is it clicking forward? There we go. PA Dutch. So as you probably know, PA Dutch means PA German. So Germany is Deutschland. So when Germans came over to Pennsylvania and founded their communities, mostly either Amish or Mennonite or German Lutheran, that's what my family was, they brought their wonderful German food with them. Apple dumplings and sausage, Schnitzenapp. Oh, so good. Stovetop cooked chicken pot pie. Pot pie in PA is not what it is here in Michigan. It's slices of dough that are cooked in a broth with potatoes and meat and onions, and it's just delicious. It's wonderful. Pig stomach, one of my all-time favorites. Anybody else in here love pig stomach? Oh, you do. Good for you. So my first time to bring my wife now, 52 years, when she was my girlfriend, brought her to my home in Pennsylvania on Thanksgiving Day. My mom walks out carrying this tray, covered tray, and lifts the cover. And my wife now, my girlfriend, says, "What the heck is that?" And my mom said, "What do you mean? It's Thanksgiving. The whole world eats pig stomach on Thanksgiving Day." And my girlfriend said, "I've got news for you, ma'am." But pig stomach is wonderful. It's an actual pig stomach stuffed with sausage, potatoes, and onions. And the lining of that stomach is thick and juicy and crisp on the outside. Mwah. It's a great German tradition. Chow chow, which is kind of like a pickled vegetable salad. Opera fudge, very sweet, delicious buttercream that's got some nice hard chocolate around it. And the giant soft pretzels that came from Germany. Do you know the background of pretzels that are hard? It happened by happen chance in Lititz, Pennsylvania. There was a girls' school by the Moravians, and they were trying to teach the girls in their theology, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and so they made this shape of the pretzel, one pretzel with three circles on the inside. And the baker that one day, after they decided to do this, left the pretzels in too long. And so they came out hard. He about threw it away. And his coworker said, "Oh, let me get a bite of that." And took a bite of that, and voila, the hard pretzel was born in Lititz, Pennsylvania, back in the 1800s. And the girls across the street loved those, and that's how the hard pretzels became what they are today. Kind of fun to know some of these things. So what about the early colonies? Let's start with our early ancestors in the early colonies. As you might suspect, the colonies varied in their food production depending on North or Middle America colonies or the South. Different ethnic backgrounds, different climates, different crops, and so a lot of those things made variations among the food. There was no one standard kind of food among those 13 colonies. And by the way, today, there are still geographical taste buds. When you think of the UP, you think of what? Pasties, sure. When you think of Mackinac Island, you think about fudge, sure. So we have our local kinds of things that we gravitate toward, and even our names sometimes change. In Boston, you buy a tonic, not a soft drink. In PA, it's soft drink. I moved to Michigan, they said, "Do you want a pop?" "Do I want a pop? Why would I want a pop?" You know, it's what you call it here. You go down to Texas, it's all Coke. What kind of Coke do you want? 7-Up? Pepsi? Whatever. So it all depends on where you are. So we still have this kind of an idea of these local geographies of food. So of course they produced their own food by and large. We had imports of molasses, imports of rum, and a few spices, and that was about it. So they were on their own to create their own crops, hunt their own game, raise their own food. So in 1621, when they had their first feast, we don't have any menu printed of what they had. It's a best guess based upon what is normally a raised crop in the area and what is indigenous. So of course, as you know, there were more natives than there were of the English who were here. They were thankful for the first harvest. They feasted on the bounty. They probably had beans, lettuce, spinach, cabbage, carrots, peas, and corn. And of course, amply, they had deer and no doubt turkey. But these were not new. Feasts, the idea of a feast was not new. So when the Europeans, I said English, when the Europeans came, they had already had a tradition of feasting. So in the Middle Ages, and I don't call them dark ages, they totally weren't dark. There was culture there, and there was art, and there was culinary science, and there was investigation. They weren't really all that dark. But during the Middle Ages, there were feasts, and they often had a roasted bird and some kind of a sour fruit. When you had a newborn, a new year, a new job, a marriage feast. So there were feasts like this. So the idea of having a feast was not new to our Pilgrim Fathers. But of course, they had the idea of the turkey, and we have evolved from that to turkey and cranberry sauce. And we still have the kind that jiggles on our kitchen table. I love that kind. So think about what they ate and how they got it. They sowed corn, they caught fish, hunted wild game, raised farm animals for milk and for meat, made their butter and cheese, planted veggies, brewed their own beer, pressed their own cider. It was not easy. So when you think about what they had to go through, my wife's going to be gone for a few days this week with my daughter on a little trip. And so the food, when I go to the freezer, pull out a wrap, throw it in the microwave, 5 minutes, I'm ready to eat. They never had that luxury. So they really had to work for their food. So corn was, of course, a dietary staple, but eating corn on the cob did not happen for a long time. So they used their corn to make corn meal. And then the corn meal became a variety of different foods for them. Or in the case of a hasty pudding, they boiled corn in milk, and that made a nice, thick, rich pudding that could have been savory or sweet. You add some sugar to it. And Johnny cakes were corn-based pancakes. They were the precursor to our American pancake today. A little thicker, a little bigger, and not quite as sweet, but the maple syrup, that certainly did the trick back in that time period. So the wild game, turkey, venison, rabbit, duck, and pigeons, but often baked into a pie. So when we talk about the normal method that families use to produce their meat and cook it and preserve it was often done in a pie, and the dough is what sealed in the juices. And because the dough sealed in those juices, that dough was called the coffin of the pie. So quite an interesting phenomenon when you think about how that word came to be used. So the crust was called coffin, and not until the 16th century did someone have the idea of putting fruit into a pie. So meat pies came long before fruit pies. The first person in world history to eat a cherry pie was Queen Elizabeth I, with sugar added, and she loved it. And it's still my favorite pie today is cherry pie. You just can't beat a cherry pie. It's my pie of choice. Now they didn't make it like that. That's a contemporary take on this old pie tradition. It would have been totally encased with that dough. And of course, with the evolution of pies came the pecan pie, shepherd's pie. Any Irish in here? All right, an Irish staple. And of course, the meringue pie and pizza pie, as my parents called it. So my parents said, "You want pizza pie for supper?" It's kind of like, when I say that now, my kids just kind of laugh me off the face of the earth, but they called it pizza pie. So preservation, of course, we're talking now about the 17 to 1800s, long before we had refrigerators, dried, salted, smoked, brine, or some combination, and also potted meat. They would cook the meat, they would stuff the meat into a ceramic pot, cover it with lard or fat or butter, and then seal it tightly, and that would be saved for days, weeks, months. And you would take the meat out, slice it, and either fry it or just on cold as a sandwich. You had that as well. So kind of a fun way to preserve that. And a lot of pickling. So again, at first, the idea of pickling was pickled meats. But again, later in time, you had pickled pickles and pickled veggies, and chow chow, of course, in Germany, which was whatever you can find veggie-wise to put into that jar. My mom would do pickles every year. We had 3 kids in my family. We would sit on the back porch and scrub these pickles all day long in these giant galvanized containers, and she'd have the brine going on in the kitchen, and we would make like hundreds of these jars for the winter, for a church, for friends, and whatever. And that's kind of a fun way to look back on that as well. So Michigan's food, hey, you had strawberry shortcake, kind of a nice precursor for this. Let's talk about the foods that we love. So a lot of our foods in Michigan, as I'm sure you already know, came from somewhere else, normally in Europe. And so we have foods in Michigan that came from Holland, from Denmark, from Poland, also the Middle East, and from Africa. So as part of my being a Dean of Arts and Sciences for many years, I have taken students on travel abroad. And I have been right now to all 7 continents and 104 countries. And I've had a chance to deliciously eat my way through those trips. Really a hardship. And I did have some strange things. I've had silkworms in Korea. Mopane worms in Africa. I've had rattlesnake in Bolivia, quite tasty. I have had some strange things, but a lot of wonderful food, a lot of delicious food. And a lot of our great foods here come from all around the world. So our food culture, in the late part of the 1800s, we had a lot of movement here from Europe. And of course, they would farm the land for their family, domestic farming. But some who were very industrious learned how to diversify and produce enough crops to earn some money and share their wealth. And so you had beginnings of farms that had the silos and barns and also general stores. And we also had African Americans who resettled here with their cuisine as well. Fried chicken, it's not a stereotype, that was birthed in Africa among the slaves. And so that came from the south up north and also to England, and from England over here as well. Because they had a lot of, they invented kind of like the pig lard frying, and chickens, of course, still today are very plentiful in Africa. I was in Uganda last year, and our host family said, do you want a chicken tonight? And I said, it'd be great. So they went out in the backyard and they caught one, and chopped off the head, and threw it in the pot of water on the back campfire behind their house. And that was the most fresh chicken I ever had in my entire life. Even saw it dance until it dropped after the head was cut off. So another interesting thing to see. So the French, Brits, and Native Americans, of course, in the 1800s, a lot of the French occupied our forts. Montcalm County, named after Montcalm, who was a general in the French Indian War. There were French in a lot of these forts, and part of our state used to be part of Canada, as I'm sure you're already aware as well. So those French soldiers brought with them their appetite for their French cuisine. And they taught the Canadians and taught Michiganders how to cook those French dishes. And Native Americans also shared their cuisine. So a lot of these things became enveloped in our culture early on. And we were in Detroit, the largest city between Montreal and New Orleans, and so that became a real melting pot for the community. By the way, you could go from Europe through the Lawrence Waterway and the locks in Montreal down to the Great Lakes and dock your boat in Michigan, and that was a great way to get here from Europe. So a lot of the ancestors that came here from Europe came directly through the St. Lawrence Waterway and the locks of Montreal to get to Michigan. Amazing story. And of course, Montreal became also a great capital of culture, still is today, in Canada. So other European immigrants, from Germany and of course Netherlands in 1850, Scandinavian, Irish, Cornish, Italian, and Polish, with a forward assembly line. You can only imagine what that did to embrace workers who came to us from all over Europe who wanted to be a part of that assembly line in Detroit. But in the 1930s, in Michigan, there were over 30 languages spoken by our students already at that time period because of what was going on in Detroit with our car industry. And we still today, our state has the largest Dutch, Finnish, and Macedonian populations anywhere in the U.S. And of course, a very strong Arabic population in Dearborn and in the Detroit area today as well. And along with that, all the great food. And you know these, Dutch in Holland, the Germans in Frankenmuth, the Danish in Greenville, the Italians and Macedons in Detroit, Middle Eastern in Dearborn, and the Swiss Amish in Montcalm County. And all of them brought their wonderful traditions of food and delicious preparation of food with them. And since 1965, a lot of Asians. So I live in Grand Rapids, so when I go downtown Grand Rapids, I will often see a sari, or I'll see a turban, or I'll see a kimono. I'll see a wide variety of Asian dress downtown, because we have a lot of immigrants right now from Vietnam and all over. So Asian Indian, Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, Japanese, Thai, and all of those foods I absolutely love. My son and daughter-in-law and I went to Thailand last December. I ate myself into a frenzy. Thai food is absolutely fantastic. And so if I see a Thai restaurant somewhere now in the area, you know I'm going to head there for some of that great pad Thai with peanut sauce on it and all that good stuff. Oh man, nothing like it. So just a lot of good stuff. A lot of good stuff. So barns and stores in the 1890s and 1900s, And we still have some of these around our area. Kind of fun to see. And of course, our staples. So jumbo cookies are the ancestor of today's sugar cookies. So far less sweet. We have recipes in some of the cookbooks shared from history. One dates back to 1585 and was certainly a popular staple in the colonies. This is from the Complete Housewife, 1727, the recipe: egg whites, flour, sugar, caraway seeds. Little hint of licorice in there. Mashed into a paste. Rose water, distilled water with the fluid from rose petals. Add that baking soda done, and you have this cookie, delightful but not quite as sweet as we're used to today. But that's kind of the ancestor of that. And what I think is no doubt the ancestor of the fruitcake. So if you're a fruitcake lover, I think this is how that began. They were called black pepper cakes. It also has antibacterial properties. Kind of like a gingerbread-like loaf with the black pepper and also candied fruits that would stud this wonderful cake. And so it certainly looks to me like, well, what we enjoy right now at this time of the year as a fruit cake. So yeah, 1749, we see a recipe of that handwritten manuscript given to Martha Washington. Sandwiches. I'm a lover of the sandwich. Do you know where the sandwich got its name?
Lord Sandwich.
The Earl of Sandwich, the fourth Earl, John Montague. So if you've been to Disneyland or Disney World, you know that their sandwich restaurant is called Earl of Sandwich for this reason. So here's the deal behind that. He did not like to get his hands soiled while he ate. He played cards all day long. And so he had his food in bread slices to keep his hands nice and clean, to hand out those cards and play his cards. So his card addiction is what gave way to his love for eating food between the breads in his sandwiches, either meat or some kind of vegetable or cheese, no doubt, in the course of time. And the hot dog came from Germany. I love hot dogs. They look like little miniature Dachshunds. So well, either beef or pork was called a Dachshund dog or a hot dog. And when they came to America through immigrants, there were four main pockets of populations who loved these things. They were New York City, Philadelphia, Chicago, and Detroit. And so they became the hot dog capitals of the early Americas. So that's kind of cool. And they all kind of had their own take on it. You know, they're red hots. And of course, Chicago, you got to have the poppy seed bun and a hot pepper. In Detroit or Flint, you got to have some Coney Island sauce and yellow mustard and some minced onions. So each area has their own little take on what you want on a hot dog. And I didn't, as a kid growing up, my dad would go to the pub and he would order a Flint hot dog. I didn't even know that Flint was a town in Michigan. I had no idea. So when I moved here, I thought, that's where that came from. Yeah, that came from Flint, Michigan. So the Flint, Detroit hot dog, the Coney Island hot dog, is from us. Kind of fun. The hamburger is kind of fun. So they've been around for a long, long time. Earlier on as meat patties. They date back to the 4th century of Rome. And so you had this baked beef patty, and easy for troops, your soldiers who were in the field, a quick way for them to get some meat and nutrition. They were first called Hamburg in Hamburg, Germany. Anybody else here from Pennsylvania in here? Am I the only one? Okay. If you go to a restaurant in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, or Lebanon, you order a Hamburg. And that's what it's called in the menu. So it's called a Hamburg. And it's called that because this is where they actually began to put the burger between a bun, top and bottom, or between two pieces of bread, kind of like a Hamburg sandwich. And so 1700s, you had the Hamburg, Germany, adding 2 slices of bread or the bun. So Walt Anderson was in a little restaurant in Wichita in 1916 and trying to make some meatballs in a little converted cable car into a restaurant, and he got mad how these 2 meatballs turned out. He took a spatula and he smashed them. Gonna toss them out. Coworker said, no, don't toss them out. Get a little bread, make a little sandwich, and see how they go. And so he got a little bread and sold those, and they were a hit. And that was the White Castle birth of the hamburgers. And White Castle became the precursor of the fast food phenomenon in America. All because this guy got mad and smashed those 2 meatballs. And so the slider is what they created. Of course, later they turned it into a square slider, and of course the rest now is history. But I think that's kind of cool. So and then White Castle just mushroomed between 23 and 31, and not only here but elsewhere around the world as well. So pizza. So if you've got an Italian background, you know that focaccia, that's it the right way, focaccia, was the precursor to pizza. Kind of like a flatbread with some sauces or some cheese or veggies on it. And so with time, this kind of evolved into what later was called pizza. You have that name actually used in AD 997. And then of course, in Italy, became a staple. And so when our GIs came back from World War I and World War II, they brought their love for pizza with them. So my stepdad served in Italy during World War II and fell in love with all things Italian. And so when he came back, he was certainly a pizza addict. But again, he called it pizza pie when we got our pizza at home. So the actual classic Italian pizza is margherita pizza. Not because they pour a margarita over it, that's not it. Named after Margherita di Savoia, who was the queen at that time of Italy. So in Naples, in the 1800s, they created this pizza with the colors of the Italian flag, red, white, and green. Neapolitan pizza. San Marzano tomatoes, mozzarella cheese, fresh basil, add some salt, an extra virgin olive oil, and mwah, there is your perfect margherita pizza that is the classic Italian pizza. So my wife and my daughter and son-in-law and I were in Italy 2 years ago on a cruise ship, and we went to Sorrento at a place that was hailed as the birthplace of the margherita pizza. And by its prices, I would say it probably is. But it was very, very good. Spaghetti means little cord. And as you, I'm sure no doubt realize it, that came first the Chinese, who made the noodles from wheat flour and water. Arabs then came in the 8th century, brought it over into the boot. And then 1200s in Sicily, they combined that with tomato sauce to make spaghetti as it is today. Not meatballs. Americans added meatballs. So if you go to Italy and let's get spaghetti, it's going to be meatballs unless you ask for the American version of spaghetti. And it's also very, it's a very thin, watery, very tomatoey tasty sauce. Not rich and thick like ours, but it tastes just like fresh tomatoes that are just poured on those noodles. And I'll tell you another fun story. This is on video, isn't it? I'll be very careful.
One moment.
Oh, you
Got to get the fun story.
Oh, you did the fun story. Oh my gosh. Okay. So we were in Italy a few years ago, a different trip, and I said I've got to have my spaghetti. Got to have it. And we were there in the afternoon when a lot of shops were closed for their kind of like their siesta time. We're in the Cinque Terre on the Italian Riviera, beautiful shops. I finally found one that was open. And so it said spaghetti, €4 for a plate of spaghetti. And I thought, man, I can't beat that price. And so I went inside. It was kind of like a serve yourself kind of a deal. You order, you get your drink or whatever. And so I paid for my spaghetti. And he said, take a seat out on the deck, overlooking the water, overlooking the beach. We'll bring it out to you. So I paid my €4, got my drink, went outside and sat down and looked over, totally nude beach. So I was kind of, okay, all right, so here's my spaghetti. So now I have a new, different insight when I eat my spaghetti. I can't get that mental picture out of my mind. Interesting. So you might want to erase that part when you put it on.
We'll edit that out. Don't worry.
So West Africa, yeah. So I've been to Africa several times, and I love Africa. And I always get a lot of chicken. Chickens are plentiful. They certainly use the pig lard frying and the seasoning for it. They took it from there to Great Britain, and of course through the slaves also. The slaves made this for their masters, and it became a southern dish. And so when we think of southern fried chicken, that's how it came to be, southern fried chicken. And then of course migrated north from there. One of my all-time favorites, I just love fried chicken. French fries. So it's French. So if you're French, here we go. Potatoes were thought to be poisonous in France. And so something phenomenal happened in the war between Belgium and France. Anton Augustin Parmentier was taken to POW and fed a steady diet of potatoes and he did not die. He actually enjoyed them. So he came back to France and said how much he loved potatoes. They were not deadly. And there was a guy who had an office on the Champs-Élysées who was an ambassador from the United States at this time. Anybody guess who that guy was? Ben Franklin. And so Ben Franklin had some French fries and absolutely loved them. And so again, they migrated quickly to our part of the world as well. And the rest, as they say, is history. And I absolutely love my French fries. And we love potatoes, baked, boiled, stewed, mashed, fried, au gratin, hash browns, roasted, crispy. And we are a potato capital of the country here in Michigan. And a large number of our potatoes go to PA to get produced into potato chips. So as I travel around the world, and no, I'm not the only one here, a lot of you are also travelers, you're in India, you're in China, you're in South America, you're buying potato chips with potatoes from Montcalm County or Michigan, processed in Pennsylvania, you're getting them in Uganda. So it's amazing how we are a supplier for the world in this regard. It's our biggest crop, 700,000 tons annually, with $150 million. It's certainly our top producer. And of course, a large part of that is MSU. I happen to be an MSU alumnus. Am I the only Spartan here? Anybody else who's a Spartan? Go green.
Go white.
All right, you know it. All right, awesome. So our poor team, we have a new coach. It's going to be all right.
Yeah,
We're going to be good.
I don't know if we need another John Smith, you know.
Never thought of it. Never thought of it.
Yeah.
Never thought of it. That's interesting.
Anyway, sorry.
So no worries. 1855 is when the school began as an ag college. I'm sure you know that. As the ag college, their main academic thrust was farming, crop production, dairy, and they revolutionized how farmers farm and how we do business. And so if you even go around Montcalm County today and look at these great silos that MSU engineered, they maximized how to store potatoes in a safe, secure, sound way for use down the pike to keep those potatoes fresh and good for a long time. A lot of great technology coming out of MSU in that regard. And of course, we have our corn, our beets, carrots, asparagus, cabbage, and onions. A lot of great favorites here. Our favorite meats: roast turkey, baked ham, fried chicken, pulled pork, lamb chops, roast beef. Anybody getting more hungry as we talk about this? And of course, our fish. We are surrounded by 4 of the 5 Great Lakes. So we have our broiled, pan-fried, baked, grilled, steamed, deep-fried. And now, of course, since 1965, sushi has taken off here as well. So the pasty. Let's talk about that for a minute. The pot pie without the pot. It's actually a real meat pie with minced meat and veggies, a little rutabaga. Invented when food prep became an art, but it came to the UP from Cornwall, England. So there they had a lot of tin miners, and when those began to go south, they moved to the UP because our mines were now beginning to emerge. And so the UP were filled with these Cornish workers who brought with them their delicacy and their favorite, which was pasty. So if you go to a UP restaurant, read the back menu, and it'll be this story basically telling you this is the background for the pasty. And of course, today the big debate is gravy or ketchup or both. And so for me, I do the both. And it's just a wonderful experience. I do love a good pasty. And of course, our fruit crops. We are the #1 producer of cherries in the U.S. 70% of tart, 20% of the sweet from Michigan, $15 million a year. So we have the Cherry Festival, of course, in Traverse City, the Blueberry Festival we have in South Haven and also in Paradise. So kind of fun to be in a city that has, or a place that has that. And for our wine, 45th Parallel runs through Michigan. So just like in the great Napa Valley in California, and also over in Italy in Chianti County, 45th Parallel. So kind of cool that we have that same wonderful environment here. How many of you know that the word donut actually implied a nut used to be there? Anybody? So the donuts were oily cakes that came from Holland that had in the middle of it a walnut or a pecan or a hazelnut. But in New York, a captain did not like the nut in the oily cake. He took it out. But his mom still kept on calling it a donut. The nut was gone, but it was still the Dutch oily cake. And that's why we still call donuts donuts. But if you want to make it a real donut, stick a walnut inside, or a pecan, or hazelnut, and you've got the real thing. But that's how the idea of donut came to be. And of course, in World War I, Salvation Army lassies and lads would serve donuts to our troops as a taste of encouragement and sweetness. And of course, a lot of the GIs came back and they wanted them. And so they actually found a donut machine process in 1920 to really help that process along. And so the GIs were the ones who really, with that love for donuts, helped to emerge that wonderful industry of donut making in America. Talk about Danish pastries. So in Denmark in the 1850s, there was a strike among the bakers. So they enlisted Austrian bakers to come in and take their place. And so they amalgamated their Austrian idea of pastry with their Danish and created this new hybrid style, kind of an Austrian-Danish pastry. And so what we have today by way of Danish pastries are Austrian-Danish pastries. And they became very popular. And of course, the most favorite today, in Greenville, is the Abel skewer. And the Abel skewer, it's pronounced skewer, even though it says S-K-I-V-E-R. I've had my Danish friends correct me on that. So Abel skewer tastes like a little bit of an apple slice, round ball European pancake. And so you put some powdered sugar on that, and it goes down real smooth. And so during their Danish festival, they just sell them like hotcakes. Really. They are. They're European pancakes, and they're just delightful, just delicious. In Hungary, goulash was made for shepherds who would make the stew, sun dry it, then put it into a sheep's stomach, and then take it out in the field, and when they were ready, they would put water in it to reconstitute it as a stew, and then cook it over a flame. So that's how their goulash came to be. And of course, chocolate. So I did not tell you that my dad, the pie baker, was a personal friend of Milton S. Hershey. So we lived 9 miles. My dad worked 9 miles away from the Hershey plant, and my dad worked as a house parent and a cook for the industrial school that Milton S. Hershey founded. And he founded the chocolate factory to finance his industrial school, a giant orphanage for the young people there in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Hershey's a great city. The streetlights are all Hershey Kisses. They alternate wrapped and unwrapped in Cocoa Avenue. It's a great place to be. But Milton S. Hershey was not the founder of this. It goes way back to 1,000 years BC. And for many, many years, the cacao bean was used to produce chocolate milk or chocolate juice. And that became called the juice of the gods, the drink of the gods. The Aztecs, the Mayans, the Incas were also a part of that later in time. The Spanish were the first ones to actually eat chocolate and began to process chocolate as a candy or an ingredient in pastry. And then, of course, in our own country here we have 1765 was the birthplace in New England, and then finally 1903, Milton S. Hershey with his large plant became one of the largest plants anywhere in the world. So is there anything that's purely American? Well, there are some things. Tuna casserole. So we didn't invent that. 1950s, got inexpensive, big family, tuna, mushroom soup, veggies and egg noodles.
Did that start with Campbell's?
It did.
Okay.
It did start with Campbell's. Yeah, absolutely it did. Grilled cheese sandwich, sort of. So we have two things going on. Sliced bread invented. So you can now buy pre-sliced bread by the guy from Iowa, Otto Frederick Rodwetter. And of course, processed cheese by James Kraft in Chicago. And so you have these two things that make it very easy for you to make this wonderful commodity called grilled cheese. Cornflakes. So the Kellogg brothers were trying to make big sheets of thin dough made of grain, and one day they overcooked it, and when it came out, it just all crumbled. And so they went ahead and tasted it, and they thought, I'll be darned, that tastes pretty good. And so that was the birth, a fluke, of Kellogg's cornflakes. And so they began to feed, in their sanatorium, they began to feed their patients with that, and again, the rest is history. Quite amazing how that came to be.
But they really, the business was the sanatorium.
Yes, that's right.
That was the true.
That was the true business, yeah.
And then the commercial.
Came out of that.
entity
Came out of that. Yeah, exactly. Good, thank you. So PBJ during the Depression You have pre-sliced bread, low-priced jelly. American GIs during their rations would get this during World War II. So again, when they came back home, they liked that flavor and liked that taste. Chocolate chip cookie. So Ruth Graves Wakefield in '36 in her toll house in Massachusetts was trying to make a chocolate cookie, and she found a block of chocolate in her kitchen, and she cut it into little pieces and mixed that with the dough, which she thought, when I bake this, that it's going to all meld together and produce a chocolate cookie. When it came out, she thought, it didn't work. There were these chocolate chips inside the vanilla cookies. So again, almost tossed those away, decided to take a bite, and again, it's kind of like, that's not bad. And so she became, because of the fluke, the founder of chocolate chip cookies. And of course, Nestle's has given her a lifetime supply of semi-sweet chocolates because they put the recipe on all of their packages of semi-sweet.
Does it go to her family still?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It does.
I think that's pretty cheap.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Sorry.
I agree, but it works.
They got a deal.
They got a good deal out of that, yeah. And we have some right there.
Yes.
Absolutely. So s'mores, anybody like s'mores? Any Girl Scout masters in here? Okay, yeah, we have some. All right, so Girl Scouts 27, the Girl Scout book, Loretta Scott Crew, campfire treat made for Girl Scouts, kind of a fun thing to do. Our granddaughter loves these. And we also did create some variations. So we are innovative. So hamburgers to the American cheeseburger, from pizza to the Chicago deep pan pizza, Chicago deep pan pizza. And of course, Detroit, we have the square deep pizza with Wisconsin brick cheese, which is our own unique Detroit pizza, which is now also getting quite its own. Detroit, kind of the capital of the world for pizza. Domino's, Pizza Hut, Little Caesars, they all were founded in Detroit. From wings to buffalo wings, from hot sandwich to Philadelphia cheesesteak, macaroni and cheese, and of course we added meatballs to spaghetti for our own variation on that. So a few things here, we'll kind of wind things down. Refrigeration. So you mentioned the History magazine. I have an article coming out in a couple of months on the background of Greenville, which used to be the capital of the world for refrigeration. So we had the corner on that. But for many years before that, people would use the lake. They would either cut ice or actually lower food literally into frozen waters, not even frozen, but put food down into the cold water to keep it cold. Or they would pack ice, they would dig a hole and pack ice in it and put hay, straw on top. So a wide variety of natural means to try to keep things cold. And then later, of course, we had the ice box, where you would have an ice man who would come and deliver ice to your door with a horse-drawn carriage. And then, of course, later in time, refrigeration processes that became the growing need with people more urban in their lifestyle. So Greenville had the Raney Company, and they made this wonderful ash box. We have one right now in our museum in Greenville, one of the actual first ones that came off the assembly line. And of course, you also have others who are going to be inventing the motors on top. The one motor was actually, it looked like a submarine, so it was kind of called the Monitor. But what happened is, by 1930s, you have Freon, a safer method, and even beyond that, more safe methods. And freezer now compartment, separate from the refrigerator compartment, and that even gave rise to some newer kinds of food, including cookies that you could make ahead of time, put in the freezer, grandma's freeze cookies, and cut those as well. So Greenville became the capital of the industry with Gibson, became later Electrolux, went to Mexico in 2005, as you, I'm sure you're all aware of that. And so what used to be this great capital of refrigeration is no longer that way. But Grandma's Ice Block Cookies has survived. And a few things about eateries. So eateries have been around since the old Roman Empire. There were taverns back then. The modern idea of cooking, of course, has taken on quite a bit of an evolution, from campfires to underground dirt ovens. So we were in Armenia last May. In Armenia, they have ovens that are still in the ground with clay, hard clay linings. They take their bread dough and they take the dough and they kind of smear it on the clay inside that underground oven. They put their hot coals in that container. They cover it, and that makes their bread called lavash. And when you take a wooden spatula and you scrape that off and lift that up, it's a very delicious kind of a sweet European bread that's just very remarkable. And that kind of an oven is a great demonstration of how people cook for a long time. And ovens like that for many, many years. So, of course, later in time, we had the Franklin stove, the cast iron stove. Of course, we had the inside fireplaces as well. So I added this. Another fun story, I think we have time for this. The one on the right, we had one just like that in the house my wife and I lived in our first year of marriage, an old farmhouse in Pennsylvania. And I had no clue how to operate this. So it was a pea coal stove. So on the right-hand side, or on the left-hand side, that little drawer there is where you put the pea coal. So I thought, all right, well, I can do this. So I got some pea coal and I put it in, lit a match, threw it in, nothing happened. Lit another latch and threw it in, nothing happened. So I thought, when you build a charcoal fire, you have charcoal lighter fluid and you douse it. So I thought, I'm going to try this. So I went down the cellar and I found a can of paint thinner. And so I thought, that'll do it. So I came upstairs and I doused it with the paint thinner. My wife's standing right next to me. And so I lit a match and I threw it in. Kaboom! These big old iron burners just flew up in the air. The oven door was dashed open. My wife and I were just covered with black soot. And so I just said to her, that's not it. So we actually called the landlord and said, how do you do this? He said, you build a wood fire first, then put the coal on top of that. I'm like, duh. So I had no idea. So anyhow, I'm so thankful we have microwaves now and, of course, all the great stuff. So, of course, we have gluten-free today. We have healthy foods. And why pay $1 for coffee when you can pay $6? So, thankfully, we have Starbucks today, industrialized foods. Restaurants, of course, as I mentioned, began in early Rome. And in France, you had taverns for travelers. And that also made its way to the States. But early on, folks, women could not come to a restaurant unescorted. You had to have a male companion or a separate room for you ladies or a separate part of the room for you ladies. So that was also instigated for quite some time.
What was the reason for that?
Because men are superior.
Oh, all right.
Common sense.
No, I don't believe that.
I know.
But I don't know what the answer is. Fun menus, macaroni and cheese, chicken fricassee, pork and baked beans, Thai macaroni, a lot of fun stuff. Roast duck, of course. And in America, it's kind of fun. Earlier on, the fancy restaurants were part of a hotel. And the plan was you paid one price for your lodging and the meals. They were not separated. That was still a European thing. But the American deal was you paid one price for your bed and for your food. So Clifford Lake Inn in Montcalm County, still going on, had it that way for many, many years. And there are many historic restaurants in Michigan, both the hotels and standalones, all over the place.
Sure.
Here's Clifford Lake Inn. Here's how it looked back in 85, 1900. Yes, there were a speakeasy during Prohibition. So you can go down in the basement, you can see where they used to have the speakeasy back in the day. And this is a 50-year-old menu from Clifford Lake Inn. World famous sauteed mushrooms, steamed shrimp, potato skins, buffalo wings, chicken tenders, layered fiesta dip, outrageous onion rings. Isn't that cool? So 50 years ago. So already, here's the historic Singing Tavern. My good friend Jim and I, in our different gear, and we have a bet between us every year on the Michigan.
Where is Sydney?
So Sydney is 14 miles northeast of Greenville. So yeah, and of course the fast food phenomenon. We have this phenomenon going on now all over the world. So no matter where I go, and no matter where you go, there's a McDonald's, there's a Burger King, there's a Pizza Hut. And I tell my students, don't you dare. When we're in Spain, you're going to eat tapas. When we're in Asia, you're going to eat rice and noodles. You're not going to go to McDonald's. Maybe the last day, when you're a little homesick, that might be okay, but not until then. And I occasionally have one of my fellow teachers, a chaperone. First thing they do is look out for the Starbucks and the McDonald's and the Pizza Hut. Come on, you're in Europe. Let's enjoy European food. But I do love this stuff. I love it all when I'm back here. drive-through and drive-in, quite a heritage. We've been to the museum down in Kentucky, in Corbin, where this was born in 1940. And of course, a lot of our favorite dishes. I asked my students, what are yours? Here are their answers. Culinary arts, of course, is how you make art out of your food and how you make it safe. So my daughter has taught me that the word chef is a French word for chief. She's the chief of the kitchen. So she's the one in charge. And of course, I'm gonna end with the idea that we don't all live in the White House, and so we share in the community. So for many years now, ever since 29, during the Great Depression, there are soup kitchens, community kitchens, food pantries, thank God for all those, and for those who work them. And two of the biggest and two of the oldest are in Michigan, Detroit and Grand Rapids. And my daughter now, to the left here, is the head chef at the community kitchen in Holland. She'll see 250 a day, and she gets food from Meyer, from D&W, from Family Fare, and she finds ways to make culinary art food for anybody who comes. The homeless, the elderly, the students, whoever, and she tries to find a way to make it the culinary art so that they have a fine dining experience in the kitchen there in Holland. And the same thing with the food pantry here, where I like to volunteer in Grand Rapids. And here's a recent picture from our thankful day as a family around our great food. And so when you think about food tonight, we're so grateful. What a great state we live in, and what a great culture we live in, amalgamated with so many backgrounds, so many ethnic backgrounds for us to enjoy as a part of the good life that we have. So thank you for allowing me to be here tonight. I do have cards here. Feel free to stop by and say hi. Get a card on your way out.
Gary would like to present you with one of the Portland historical
cool.
artifacts. This is a pen that's made from the light poles
Wow.
that were part of historic Bud Plant Field here in Portland.
Yeah.
Lieutenant Plant was a decorated World War II pilot and a gifted ball player. And so we'd like
That
to
is really
write your menu with that.
awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.